Subscribe to Bloody Monday and watch chilling horror stories almost every week. Don't forget to press the bell icon.
The Haunting of Bly Manor. Bly Manor was a very huge and beautiful mansion in Scotland. In 1974, a guy named Robert Dave William bought a newly constructed mansion, Bly Manor, and started living in it. It had been just 27 days since he started living there when the watchman of Bly Manor saw William running away from the house. He stopped to hand over some money to the watchman and asked him to run away too. William never returned to Bly Manor after that night. 5 years later, William's sister and brother-in-law died in an accident, and the court gave custody of his niece and nephew to him. Reluctantly, William accepted the court's order, but in order to get rid of his 12-year-old nephew Ron and 7-year-old niece Sophie, he sent them to Bly Manor. The caretaker of the mansion, Mrs. Mandy, started taking care of the two kids. William used to send money for their expenses, but never visited Bly Manor to meet them. Almost 7 months later, William hired a home teacher for Ron and Sophie named Jewel Adams. The next day, Jewel visited Bly Manor and was very happy to meet Mrs. Mandy and the two kids. But Ron and Sophie behaved very rudely with Jewel. Mrs. Mandy scolded the two kids and sent them to their rooms. She welcomed Jewel and gave her a tour of the entire mansion. She told her that because of the kids' insolent behavior, they had been rusticated from the school. While getting a tour of the mansion, Jewel saw a young man's shadow in the window of her room. She asked about it, but Mrs. Mandy said that apart from the three of them, nobody lived on the property. Jewel thought she would have seen something else and ignored it and started working on the study plan for the kids. After some time, Jewel again saw that boy, but this time it seemed as if he was calling her outside. Jewel went out in the yard, but didn't find anyone. She went back to her room and found a young girl sitting on her bed. Jewel was taken aback. She called that girl, but the girl didn't respond. Jewel went near her and placed her hand on her shoulder. The moment she touched her, she fell back on the floor. The girl then got up, and her entire skin started to melt. Her eyes started to bleed as if someone was eating her eyes from within her body. Seeing this horrific incident, Jewel started screaming. Mrs. Mandy, Ron, and Sophie came running to her room and asked what had happened. Jewel didn't say anything, and thought because she had traveled so much, she was tired and was just hallucinating. While having dinner, Jewel noticed that Sophie was smiling at someone. She asked her, but Sophie once again responded rudely to her. Just when Mrs. Mandy was about to scold her, Jewel stopped her and politely talked to Sophie and even gave her an ice cream. This made Sophie really happy, and she even thanked Jewel for it. That same night, while sleeping, Jewel felt as if someone was knocking on her window. She got up to check, but didn't find anyone, so she went back to sleep. Suddenly, the window broke. Jewel woke up at once and saw that someone had smashed the window glass with a stone. She went out and found Ron with a few stones in his hand. Ron had his gaze fixed at a distant point. Jewel called out his name many times, but Ron didn't respond, and suddenly he dropped all the stones and went running back into the mansion. When Jewel followed him, An invisible force lifted her up in the air and tossed her outside. The mansion's door shut on its own. On the window above the door, Jewel saw that same girl again who was in her room in the evening. The girl kept staring at Jewel. Seeing all this, Jewel got so scared that she fainted right there. But when she got up the next morning, she found herself in her room. Jewel was shocked because last night she had fainted in the yard. When Mrs. Mandy brought tea for Jewel, she asked her how she got back to her room. Mrs. Mandy got confused and told Jewel that she was in her room the whole night. Jewel looked at the broken window, but then she found that the window was totally fine. This made Jewel think that she probably saw a bad dream. In the afternoon when Jewel was teaching Ron and Sophie, Sophie suddenly got up and started shouting at Jewel and said, "Miss Dona didn't teach this way. I wanted to study only from Miss Dona." Later, Jewel asked Mrs. Mandy about Ms. Dona. She told Jewel that Ms. Dona used to teach the kids before she took over. The kids' behavior changed since Dona started teaching, and they became so insolent that they were even suspended from school. Shortly after that, Dona died. Jewel wanted to know more, but Mrs. Mandy changed the topic and went away. Jewel heard some noise coming from the basement. She went down, and what she saw absolutely gave her chills. She saw Miss Dona. Dona looked very scared as her head was in her hand. This sight left Jewel stunned in silence. She gathered herself and ran out of the house in fear. But she found Sophie in the yard, playing with none other than Dona. Jewel grabbed Sophie's arm and took her inside the mansion. Then Jewel once again saw the boy on the window, but this time his face changed shape into a devilish shadow. Jewel left Sophie inside and once again stepped out to find Ron. Jewel brought Ron inside as well and tried to explain the kids calmly. She kept asking Ron about the boy on the window, but he didn't utter a word. That's when Sophie told her that the man on the window was their driver, Peter. Peter used to take them to school, and then Peter and Dona fell in love. Shortly after, both of them died. Jewel had understood that both of them were trying to possess the kids and the entire mansion. She hugged the kids, and even the kids felt nice. Jewel told Mrs. Mandy to write a letter about all this and send it to William so that he knows that the kids' lives are in such danger. Mrs. Mandy wrote the letter and put it in the postbox, but Ron took the letter out and burned it. One night Jewel was woken from her sleep, and she found that Sophie was standing in front of her with a knife in her hand. Jewel anxiously got up and took away the knife from Sophie. Just then Jewel saw that the ghost of Dona was standing behind Sophie. She immediately sent Sophie away along with Mrs. Mandy to Williams, but Ron was nowhere to be found in the house. The next day, Jewel was looking for chalk in the basement when she came across some signs of rituals on the wall behind a box. She also found 2 dolls with Ron and Sophie's names written on them. Along with that, there were also tricks written to impress Satan, below which Dona and Peter's names were written. She understood that Dona and Peter worshipped Satan and wanted to control the kids so they could sacrifice them to make Satan happy. But their black magic got the better of them, and the 2 of them died. But even today their spirits are wandering to take the souls of Ron and Sophie. By then, Jewel got a call from Mrs. Mandy, and she told Jewel that Bly Manor was built over a graveyard, and William left the house as he had already been seeing paranormal activities in the house. He was so scared that he fell on the stairs while running and got bruises all over his body. Listening to this, Jewel got really scared and had understood why Bly Manor had even more evil than just the spirits of Donna and Peter. But before she could do anything, Ron came over and Jewel saw Donna and Peter's ghost behind him. Ron was crying inconsolably. He let out a loud scream and fell right there. The moment he fell, Donna and Peter's ghosts disappeared. By the time Jewel touched Ron's body, he had stopped breathing. The next day, William sent a car to bring back Jewel from the mansion to the city. And since that day, Bly Manor has been locked forever. If you liked our story, then don't forget to subscribe to our channel, Bloody Monday, for chilling horror stories every week.